I have three issues that I wanted to bring up. One is inconsistent and contradictory information on radio frequency emissions from smart meters has been provided by PG&E, and this is at odds with other expert findings. PG&E makes various claims on how often smart meters transmit RF from once every hour to about 4% of the time. There was one research group, Electrical Power Research Institute, reported that the PG&E figures appear to be time averaged rather than in real time. And so accurate information on radio frequencies is critical for interested parties to evaluate evidence of health, environmental, safety, and privacy impacts. And the question is this: will PG&E provide us with an independent radio frequency emission study reflecting actual operating conditions for the smart meter program? Because without that, we really don't know all what we're talking about. And I really have heard different radio frequency rates given by PG&E at different times, and talking to individuals, I've heard different things. And this has been requested through the CPUC, and I think when you guys come back, you may not have it in time for that, but I would really like to know that there was an independent study going on of the meters that have already been installed, so we could all know what we're talking about. And then I'm a doctor of oriental medicine. I work over in San Anselmo. And the health concern issues that I have are this. Numerous studies have linked radio frequency exposure to childhood leukemia. Every year we have about 1,100 cases of leukemia, childhood leukemia, unfortunately, in the state of California. Now, when this event occurs in a home equipped with a smart meter, and the parents or the hematologist request, perhaps because of prudent avoidance, removal of the meter, does PG&E feel like it has a legal obligation to remove that? And beyond that, would PG&E feel like it has a moral obligation at that time to remove the meter in that situation? And the question is, would they remove the meter? And that's not just a hypothetical. We have 1,100 of these every year in the state of California, and there's been a lot of studies linking childhood leukemia. So, this is a real life issue which will come up in unfortunately. And then the final one is kind of formula, but if detrimental, in the event that detrimental health effects were proven by RF meters at some future time, does PG&E have adequate liability to cover the damages that may occur for the approximate 7,000 Fairfaxians, 250,000 of us in Marin County, and the people of California? So those are my questions, and I would appreciate if we could get that in writing rather than just oral comments. So thank you very much.
No, you're.
I'm on.
You're on.
Okay. I'm going to read this for Sierra Salem. My name is Yvette Wakefield, and I'm going to read this for him because he couldn't stay here, and I feel the same way about this. I am here today to address the forced and undemocratic installations of smart meters. Whatever one may believe or disbelieve about them, there are issues which should and need to be addressed. The intent of smart meters is a good one. However, the implementation of them is insanity. They can and should be hardwired, not wireless. The security issues need to be worked out first, and all service locations should still be physically monitored monthly to watch for unsafe conditions and defects. There is so much which could and should be done first through education and conservation, but perhaps that is not as profitable for the shareholders, ? I am being told that there is no opt-out, no discussion, just the way it is. This is not the America which has been fought for more than 234 years. This is a corporate dictatorship and a lack of sane governmental policy. There is no federal mandate to install smart meters. The main issues which I want answers to before subjecting everyone to the technologies are: 1, RF radiation, which is cumulative in our bodies. PG&E has put out conflicting, unknown, misleading, and/or changing data in regards to just how much energy is pulsed and how often the smart meters cycle and transmit as repeaters or as individual units. And what about in multiple banks of them at apartment buildings or a duplex? Which of you would choose to have yourself, your child, or loved ones sleeping on the opposite side of that wall? Are we to accept a 3-plex of smart gas, electric, and water meters for every dwelling unit? Who are these wizards or gods so intent on changing the little left of the Earth's magnetic fields? We do not know what we are doing nor how it affects all other life. There will soon be no place one can avoid electro-mush except for the wilderness. Lack of security or privacy of the data, including possible monitoring by unknown entities with nefarious intent. For example, being able to tell if someone is home for theft purposes. The loss of meter reader jobs, especially in the current economy, is crazy. These are the people who physically walk the streets every month and are able to monitor the infrastructure at every service meter and are aware of unsafe conditions. I guarantee you that there will be more fires, accidents, and mishaps as monthly visual monitoring ceases to exist. The recent San Bruno disaster is just one example of misguided priorities by PG&E. PG&E keeps trying to minimize, belittle, and dismiss the issues, blowing smoke and acting like an Orwellian monster. This is the corporation which recently spent $40 million, which came out of our pockets, trying and failing to enshrine its monopoly in the California Constitution via Prop 16. Government should be protecting our interests, the we the people. I hear the CPUC, FCC cited as keeping us safe, or how there already are wireless networks for cell phones and the resultant towers around us. And that somehow justifies or makes any of it safe or sane in the long run? Many of us do not believe any of this is a terribly good idea, and where is our choice or freedom to remain unmolested? I did not choose to be surrounded by ever-increasing cell towers or my neighbor's wireless devices, and I am being subjected to it. We all are. Can you prove beyond any doubt that it is inconsequential, or that lots of profit and lobbyists talking? Or is that lots of profit and lobbyists talking? There are effects and consequences to our technologies, many of which will not be known with certainty for many years. I am not willing to be an oops statistic in the future because of short-sighted corporate dictatorship which cares about absolutely nothing except for monetary profits, or because of impotent governance that is increasingly beholden to the corporate god. There is no reason to rush into this. The gods of profit and tech are no better than the gods of transparency, democracy, or community, and in my opinion, they come later in the line, not first. I am glad you put a moratorium on smart meters in Fairfax until these issues are dealt with in a democratic process which is not dictated by power and money. Also, require PG&E to save and not destroy any old meters. It will be much more expensive to go back otherwise. Work for peace, community, and wholeness for all on this shrinking earth always. My name is Shamal Sayah. I live at 100 Western Lane. And I thank you for being here, Mr. PG&E. You know, my father is passed away now, but he spent his life working for PG&E. And PG&E was my hero all that time. And it grieves me now to see that they are now someone I am in panic and fear around. So with that, I will just read these questions, and I've done my best with each one to have a clear question at the end. A smart meter was installed at my house in Fairfax without my permission. Excuse me, I've given you the questions so that you'll have them for later and that you don't need to take notes. I would really like to be present and eye contact a little bit, okay? I really appreciate it, thank you. The smart meter was installed in my home without my permission.
I didn't even know anything about it. It apparently is not active yet, but the unit is installed and I was not informed. Why not, and why did PG&E not educate me honestly on this issue before installation in my home? Second, my electric meter is right outside the wall where my bed is, and I sleep with my head against the same wall as this electric meter. What is going to happen when the smart meter is active? I fear I will be harmed by this. My fears must be addressed and eliminated before any activation is scheduled. Next, where did this whole smart meter project originate? I understand it is being implemented throughout the United States. Does that mean it originated out of Washington, D.C., federal departments, or what? Please tell me the origin of this mastermind project and how I can get historical data on how this whole thing was masterminded and who I can talk to. Next, why are you targeting individual homes rather than a device that monitors energy usage at the entrance of a town or a community? Has this been considered and thought through? I want to know who has the answers to these types of questions. Next, why was an in-depth health impact study not done first, and the public fully engaged, informed, and educated ahead of time, so our input could have helped the designing of this project? I want a truthful answer to this question. Next, the personal security issues are a grave concern. I do not want it minimized that our privacy in our homes is being violated. My understanding is that our homes can be targeted so that it can be known when someone is home and when occupants are not home. This is absolutely unacceptable. We must have the right to decline this type of personal invasion, and I'm not even talking about what the cyber invasion might be. Next, it is my understanding that PG&E would be conducting medical experiments on humans without permission by this use of the smart meter, given all the known and unknown harms from EMFs and radio frequencies. And we would not be given a choice to accept or decline. Where does WIRB, which is the Western Institutional Review Board, stand on this issue? How are you working with them on this issue? And if you are not, then why not? They seek to ensure that the risks of scientific advancement shall never outweigh the value of human life. I do not feel the value of my life is being considered in this issue of smart meters, and I demand that it be considered of high value. And last, how would I be able to measure the radio frequency pulses that would be entering my house? Years ago, PG&E came to my home free of charge and gave me an energy audit and educated me as to the EMF that was emitting from my home appliances, and I was able to adjust equipment, etc., so that I was minimizing EMF impact on my health. My understanding is that the device to measure radio frequencies is quite expensive and something I could not afford to buy. Would PG&E be offering free audits where they would come into our homes with this device and measure the radio frequency pulses so we would see what it actually is, and then match this data up with research showing the known safety measurements and if they are within these ranges, and if not, why not? And I'm just going to add two more things that just came up from these presentations. It's not just our home. When we go, maybe we could somehow get it off our house. But if it's around the county, I'm going to get it in my job. I can't get away from it. It's going to be all over the place. And the other thing about Disabilities Act and people with hypersensitivities to illness, electrical illness, they are the canaries in the mind. Okay? And it will be us next. And it will be you next. And it will be your children next. Thank you.
First off, by the end of next spring, you won't even be over 90% of Fairfax's energy provider. You're going to be a bill collector.
Mark, back away from the mic a little bit.
I will. Okay. So, in essence, you're not even going to be our electric provider, because most of us have Marin Energy Authority, so you're not even our company. You're just a bill collector. I don't think that gives you the right to affect the meters when we're getting our power from somewhere else. Secondly, one of the big arguments against Marine Energy Authority was, well, there's no opt-out, or you have to physically opt out. Why isn't there an opt-in? Well, you're giving us neither, which is totally absurd. Next, $2.2 billion. So I was on a plane a couple weeks ago, and I looked at the Sky Mall magazine, and wow, I can buy that same technology as a smart meter for $100 from Sky Mall, which means that it probably costs $80 anywhere else, which means that wholesale is probably $30 or $40, which means that within 18 months I'll be able to have it as an app on my iPhone for $5. So what's the $2.2 billion? Next, standby power. Standby power in the United States is enough to power the entire country of Australia normally. I think power strips that turn off appliances are a much better way to go if you really want to save energy. The $2.2 billion, that's a lot of power strips, because I'm sure that with PG&E's buying power, it wouldn't cost more than $8 to $10 to get really, really super good ones. Next, there's a new thing called solar clothes dryers. We used to call them clotheslines. In California, you can probably dry your clothes on a line 4 to 6 months a year. Let's see, is that 10 or 12 bucks maybe for some rope? Duh.
Tony Hughes, 7th Ward Stairs, Fairfax. I'm having a problem with the fact that my building did not emit any signals before PG&E decided to put their meter on it. Now you've changed my building, and I don't like that. And the other top of it is, I don't have a cell phone, I don't use any wireless, and I don't want to be subject to this. And I believe that this is an issue about democracy here. We have a choice in this, and I don't see how big money's going to come along and say we don't, because we live in America and we're supposed to have democracy, and this is the public's choice, not a company's choice. Now another issue I have here is, what are you going to do with all the batteries after they wear out in the gas meter? Now it becomes hazardous waste. So how does that help the environment? All right? And another one is are you guys planning to get into the wireless business? Because what business now after this can say, we have an antenna in every building, we can provide you with wireless service. So that 40 seconds or those 40 little blips it makes in a day are going to turn into a lot longer than that.
Judy Hitchcock, 90 Chester Avenue. I have a list of questions just for clarification and some issues regarding the basis for the PG&E's claim that smart meters are safe. But in terms of clarification, my first question is, my understanding is that the smart grid system envisions transmitting smart meters for both gas and electric meters outside the home, and ultimately transmitting meters on all appliances throughout the home, but that latter part might be optional, and I just want clarification on that. And that the gas and electric meters outside the home can also act as repeaters, so that if the surrounding meters can't for some reason reach the access point, they can then transmit through your meter, causing your meter to have additional pulses. And I've seen different estimates on the frequency of the radio transmissions from the meters, from estimates that they will be pulsing transmitting every 4 hours, and then to once an hour, and then to once every 45 seconds. And my question is the difference for these estimates due to the fact that a meter could be acting as a repeater for adjacent meters and therefore transmit every few seconds? The next question, what is the intensity of a peak pulse? I understand that the average pulse described by PG&E is calculated by including periods of time when the meter is not transmitting, but that at the point at which the meter is transmitting data, it's almost 1,000 times more powerful than a cell phone, and I want to check on if that is correct. And can PG&E provide us with a map of all the access points and repeater locations in Fairfax and the surrounding communities? There is clear documentation of people with EMF sensitivities having adverse reactions to the smart meters. And I was just curious about what advice or recommendations PG&E is giving to people who suffer from EMF sensitivities. Many of us, like me, have meters located right outside the wall next to our beds and are concerned about the proximity of transmitting meters. Will PG&E be making arrangements for these meters to be moved to make residents less vulnerable to RF transmissions, or can PG&E make such a meter not serve as a repeater? Then my next set of questions relate to the basis for PG&E's claim that smart meters are safe. PG&E claims in various papers and based on its study by Richard Tell that the devices comply with applicable FCC regulations by a very wide margin. But I think if you go back in 2002, the EPA, there was a letter written by Norbert Hankin of the Radiation Protection Division of the EPA that states that the FCC's current exposure guidelines are thermally based and do not apply to chronic non-thermal exposure situations. That is, they are the current guidelines are believed to protect against injury that may be caused by acute exposure that result in tissue heating or electric shock and burn. So they've clarified that they don't apply to the chronic non-thermal exposure situation. In the same letter, the EPA acknowledged that there were reports of the potentially adverse health effects, such as cancer from the prolonged low-level non-thermal exposure, and acknowledged the uncertainty about the possible risk of this exposure that continues for years. It clarified that the federal health and safety agencies have not yet developed policies concerning possible risk from long-term non-thermal exposures. So my question is the fact that PG&E is claiming that these devices comply with the regulations kind of seems meaningless if the regulations don't apply. Also, wouldn't it be better if we waited until there was actual studies done and that federal health and safety agencies have developed the regulations based on long-term studies? I understand that most of the health studies on the EMS now have focused on cell phones, but not on electric devices that pulse. It would seem that an independent study on the long-term effects of these devices is called for before requiring people to have a smart meter. I am actually concerned that one day it will be like the cigarette companies coming back after years of claiming that cigarettes are safe. And is PG&E really ready for the fallout and liability for this? My last set of questions is the alternatives. I understand that there are other options to smart meters, non-transmitting meters that can calculate variable rates and meter power. What options to smart meters do PG&E look at, and what are their pros and cons? I strongly believe that people should be given a choice as to their EMF and RF exposure. If PG&E is not willing to allow folks to opt out of the smart meter program, would they at least be willing to look at alternatives to smart meters for the residents of Fairfax?
Diane Hoffman, 33 Porteous, Fairfax. And I don't think opt-out is good enough. I don't think individual opt-out is good enough. What I would like is the entire town of Fairfax to be smart meter free. I think that individual opt-outs. I want to know if I'm safe, at least for now, if I have the sign on my smart meter. Will PG&E respect this sign? I want to know if it's going to respect it, or do I need to have someone put a lock on my gate to make sure someone is not going to put a smart meter on my property? And that's a question. And if it is opt-out, and I called PG&E months ago about this, saying I do not want it. They said, well, we're not going to send a meter reader all the way to your house for one person to read your meter. Well, a solution to that is let me read my own meter, because I know there are people now with the old meters who for years have been reading their own meters because for whatever reason PG&E was not able to have access to their meters. So rather than have to say we can't send out a meter reader, you could let the homeowner read their own meters. Thanks.
So
And there's something I don't understand, because I thought there was a moratorium for the town of Fairfax, and so some meters have been installed already. So I thought if there's a moratorium, doesn't that mean that you can't, or how come that was done anyway, even though there was a moratorium in place? So that's my question. I don't know. That's it.
Hello, my name is Sarah Riley. I live at 26 Maple, Fairfax. I am a health practitioner. I'm a clinical nutritionist. And I also have electrical hypersensitivity, not by choice. I live in Fairfax for the very reason of the through line of consciousness around the environmental hazards such as cell towers and pesticides, and that this community is not saturated in electro-smog. I found this refuge after spending many years in isolation with severe chemical and electrical sensitivity. I do not want to be subject to the mesh gate. I am disturbed by the hasty, undemocratic actions of PG&E, neglecting to take action on communities' concerns and individuals' concerns, ignoring public plea evaluation of efficacy of energy measurement, privacy concerns, and health concerns. My question, one of my many questions, is have you really studied the physiological impacts of RF in regards to these meters on human physiology? I know the impacts of RF on human physiology. I know them personally, and I know them scientifically. In fact, I asked your EMF expert at your open forum here in Fairfax, what are the levels inside the home where people are residing? He replied, we've never measured that. We should probably do that at some point. I see that as the very commonest, the crux of this entire conundrum. Haste has made waste at the cost, literally and figuratively, of human welfare. Who is really listening? Here are what some people are experiencing in their homes. Recently, in the San Francisco Chronicle, a woman became ill after installation of her smart meter. Headaches, ringing of the ears, sleep disturbance, burning of the face and hands. These are from a variety of other people who have experienced physiological impact. Heart irregularity, agitation, memory loss, inability to concentrate, nervousness, inability to get my work done, as some people explain, interrupted sleep. I felt as if I was becoming unhinged. Communities and medical doctors are requesting moratoriums, just to say stop. Just stop. Let's take a deeper look that hasn't been looked at yet. Something is wrong. Stop until a proper assessment of health effects has been conducted. A doctor report. A 45-year-old woman with MS has been stable for several years. After installment of a smart meter, she goes downhill rapidly. Depression, flu-like symptoms, and severe fatigue. Another woman with MS, 50 years old, gets smart meters, falls, breaks two ribs, punctures a lung. A 10-year-old child with high-functioning autism gets a smart meter. His handwriting deteriorates, he seems more fatigued, he gets flu-like symptoms frequently, loses his appetite, stops gaining weight. A 65-year-old woman gets a smart meter. At the head of her bed, 4 of them actually, she lived in a condo. So she began having tinnitus, sleep disturbance, intermittent confusion, memory problems, heart palpitations, and diabetes. Proper comprehensive analysis of environmental and health impacts has not been acknowledged in this aggressive rollout. A little about these symptoms, and just one of the many potential physiologic correlations. The 902 to 928 megahertz range is problematic. I speak in particular right now to the issue of the blood-brain barrier. It is proven that RF within this spectrum breaches the blood-brain barrier. Again, upon breach of the blood-brain barrier, on a functional level, brain immunity is not selective, explaining many of these physiological symptoms that are being reported. When the brain perceives it is under attack from any foreign invader that has entered the brain environment, and we never hear about this in regards to blood-brain barrier, but what happens is that any foreign invader not normally in the brain environment, it responds to all cells. Cells called the glial cells, they're immune response cells of the brain. They react to all cells, not just the invader. So healthy neurons, healthy brain tissue gets attacked. And that kicks up a whole inflammatory cycle in the brain that also goes peripherally. That means also system-wide. So this is in connection to much of the overlooked mechanism which RF induces inflammation, autoimmunity, and a variety of different cancers. Again, looking at the mechanism of cause and downstream events from breaching of the blood-brain barrier, not just direct cause.
So my question is, where is the deep third-party environmental and health impact research and deep surveys that need to be done? Where is the inquiring and the investigation in these cases that come up with severe physiological dysfunction after these are placed in their home? I mean, these signals may be invisible, but they have impact. Thank you.
My name is Sudie Scull, sorry. And they're going to be installing smart meters in my neighborhood in 6 weeks. I'm already surrounded by 3 that are a block away, and I'm having to go through a great deal of stuff. I don't want to have to go through it in order to sleep and bring the tinnitus in my ears and the lack of balance and headaches and all that down so I can just sort of deal. And, you know, I think you guys seem like nice guys. You know, Denise Alexander, who had my meter taken out in the beginning of January when one was put in without my knowledge, and I got extremely sick then, seems really nice. And, you know, it's great to say, you know, hey, we haven't done the public relations work and educated. That's just baloney. I hate to say it. You know, it's a good thing to hide behind. But we know what's going on, okay? And that we in Northern California are more cutting edge, we're more aware. And who knows? I mean, I've heard things from different PG&E people that you guys chose a more robust technology here because of the hilly terrain. I don't know. Your program is so non-transparent, it's hard to know. So I want to address that. And then second, these meters are not being rolled out around the world. They're more pilot projects, okay? And in a lot of areas where they've been put in, such as New Zealand, they're starting to put them in. They've been having lots of fires, and they're starting to stop the rollouts. And specifically in Italy and Germany, they use fiber optics, so they're safe, okay? And Netherlands said no. UK has taken some of them out because they're worried about cybersecurity. So, you know, there's many other options, such as the fiber optics, such as going back to the good old-fashioned cyclers on air conditioners. Because I have my electricity turned off in my house now, except for the refrigerator. That's the only other way I can survive in my house. And I thought my bill, I was kind of excited it would go like way, way down. You know, and it did kind of drop when I got down to 1 light, but I thought, okay, now I'm just doing candles. And I thought, oh, my bill's going to go down another $5. It went down $1.50. The reason we are using so much electricity is because of these air conditioners. And we're building in areas where we probably shouldn't even be living. But if you're going to make smart meters mandatory, let's make cyclers mandatory instead, okay? You know, and let's just, you know, we're at the beginning. It's almost like we're in nursery school now. We know we have an energy crisis. And, you know, you started in on this program, you hopped in quickly. I honestly think you kind of hid behind the green, I call it green hoax, because there was a lot of money to be made. But I'm sure you were somewhat concerned. I'm not talking about you guys, but corporate PG&E about, you know, the global economy also. But the truth is, we're now learning that all this RF is making people sick. And it's not just, you know, we get the packet in the mail saying, kind of patting you on the back, saying, you're okay, you know, you're really fine, don't worry. Basically, it's in your head. Believe me, it's not in your head, because all the symptoms that people report are consistent. I didn't know one had been put in. I'm a marriage and family therapist, and I'm also a certified nutritionist, and I know what goes on in the body. And the person who just spoke gave an accurate, incredible representation of what goes on. Meanwhile, there's also new data that hasn't been mentioned. There's a new brain scan that came out of France just recently that shows how the circulation within the brain, you can see it, it's not there. You know, it affects you. And so no wonder there's so much cognitive and limbic dysfunction, you know. Additionally, Dr. Maga Havas in Canada, she extracts blood before and after a cell phone, and she shows that the blood hemoglobin doesn't function properly. So there's just so much information surfacing. And I ask you, why is there such a rush? And, you know, I hear PG&E saying, well, the CPUC has ordered us, and I've actually heard the CPUC admit to that. But I've also heard Obama's, his energy program, we've talked to some people there recently, and they said that this smart grid did not have to happen in the way that it's, you know, being put out. And we have different PG&E informants, and we've heard that actually the components, and there was a fellow here that just mentioned it, only cost about $15 to $20. And if you take this $2.2 billion, guess what? That translates to about $250 to $500 per, you know, person. And so it's actually a good way for PG&E to make a lot of money. And their document, it's called AMR, Automatic Meter Reading. And, you know, the global warming is only mentioned once. So it's a great way to make money. And, you know, you got to stop. You know, you got to recognize you've done some things wrong. You know, you had some good intentions, but others weren't. And you just have to say, look, and this is what you guys, you work here. You want to do a good job. I can see you're caring people. You need to go back and say, we need to rethink this program. There's too many people getting sick. In California alone, according to the California Department of Health Services in 1998, there are 120,000 electromagnetically sensitive people who cannot work. All of those people, I promise you, will be California refugees. Where are they going to live? I mean, because I've been, out doing so much outreach, I get these really sad stories of people who have this condition but have been able to be stabilized. And now this, like one woman, she just is going from deck to deck, and she's allergic to the tent. She doesn't have a car. She was really stable in Berkeley. Berkeley, I can't even drive through. I have to wear this veil thing that's, has magnetic stuff in so that my buzz in my ears just doesn't drive me nuts, and I get so dizzy I feel like I can't even drive. So something is wrong. So I really ask you, and I think you guys are honorable people, you're listening to us, and you need to go back and say, we have got to rethink this program. Yes, we're going to lose some money. You've lost money in other ways. You've done things that weren't right. You're still making good money. We know how much Peter Darby made last year, $9.4 million. There's plenty of money around. And maybe you'll have a year where you don't make quite so much. That's fine. There's low rates. You can go into a little bit of debt. Okay? And so just do what you need to do, which is to get this program, stop, do the health investigation, and start looking into another way of implementing this program so we're not all getting sick. And remember, Northern California was the one that started the anti-smoking program. It's now worldwide. Even in Cairo, in Egypt, where 65% of people smoke, they are banning it in public places. And it started in Berkeley. And so this is starting here, and it's spreading. People are learning just how bad RF radiation is for you. Okay, so thank you. Really think hard. Okay, we're people, and we're not stupid. Okay, thanks.
My name's Janet. I live at 7 Forest Terrace here in Fairfax. And I'm just curious to know what the rollout plan is. I understand that there was a resolution passed by Town Council. However, in the last week or so, there's been continual work being done in Fairfax by PG&E. I understand currently there's SmartMeters being installed. So I would just like to hear or get an answer to understand the rollout plan, specifically for Fairfax. More about this process. It's great that you're here to talk to us. However, while we're talking, and I don't know when you're coming back, I'm not here in a couple weeks, are we going to hit a critical mass of, at the same time, enough meters installed in Fairfax that we're going to be at the point of no return? So I appreciate this process, but I really want to understand more about your rollout plan and that process. And really, what influence do you think we can have during this conversation? I mean, we're going to have to escalate our action and go to a lawsuit. It would be great to just understand, what you think you can do for us in not just giving us information and answers, but also creating action.
My name is Peter Lacroix, and I'm at 71 Broken Drive. I currently live in a house that has the meter inside the house. The meter actually looks at it through the window. Sometimes I let him in. And I'm sure there are other older homes like this too. I'm a little concerned that this electromagnetic, I don't have a cell phone, or I've stayed away from that. I'm one of the only people I know that doesn't have one. I'm concerned in a situation like that, will PG&E make an exception? Because this meter is right in my living area. I mean, literally right in my living area. So if I'm in my living room, I can look at it. You know, it's on an older porch that had been incorporated into a living space. So that's my question. Thank you.
Jim Rice, 192 Laurel Drive, Fairfax. Several months ago, my neighbor across the street started getting headaches. I said, Doug, how long have you been getting these headaches? July. Do you have a smart meter? Yeah. When was it put in? July. He's got other symptoms now, too. Maybe it's other things. Maybe it's a coincidence. I don't think so. I'd like to know how PG&E gets off on thinking that we have to apply to you for exemptions. That's crazy. Apply to you for an exemption? Why should we have to do that? You're putting yourself up there in the same league as the East India Company. And you know what happened to their tea.
Hannah Dress, 28 Porteous. One of the things that I'm concerned about with this is the property rights issues. You know, it's been a really big effort for us to buy a home and to maintain that home as a young family. And it's painful to me that other people want to come in and do things to my home without my permission, close to my child's bedroom. And I think, you know, there's just another one of those American values that seem to be, you know, maybe not as considered as I hoped we were going to consider them, into democratic process, property, things of that nature. But I really feel like there's a problem here, and I wonder whether, and kind of one of my questions is it perhaps sort of a vestigial element of when PG&E was a public utility serving the public interest, that gave PG&E, quote unquote, the right to engage with my home in that way. But now that PG&E is a profit-making entity that on a regular basis over many years has disregarded the interests of my family and my community, my state and my world, it's really hard for me to accept the right of PG&E to be on my property. And I did speak with a PG&E representative about it, and I admit that I did get a little upset when I was told I couldn't opt out. But I was really concerned to hear that, you know, essentially the person, I don't remember their exact words, but they were talking like lawsuit to me if I were to in any way prevent access to the meter. And so I think we're kind of in a sense, like in a little bit, I don't know if this is detente or what we're dealing with here, but, you know, there's like a lack of we're at an impasse. I think we're at an impasse here. So this is a community that I think overwhelmingly really does not want this to happen. It's a community that stands behind its actions and speaks up for things and tries to be a leader. And I think we're going to be a huge pain for you guys, and I really would like to save you the trouble.
Yes. Yes.
So, you know, to the extent of your abilities, I know it's a very large organization, and you have probably many decision makers you have to work for, but to please, you know, let people know this is not a community that's going to take this lightly. We have really deep, profound concerns when we're talking about my kid, my house, you know, my democracy. These are major, major issues. It's not just like, oh, some little thing, like, oh, my rate's going up.
Yeah.
Our rates have gone up, you know, and we're living, but this is something that's hard to live with. Thank you.
David Wick, 297 Cascade Drive. I'm not going to go over what everyone else has talked about so articulately about the adverse health effects of these smart meters. I just want to briefly bring it in a different context. I think what's happening locally here in Fairfax is exemplary of something that's happening all around the country, and that is this little town is involved in a struggle against a major corporation, and there are two things that are being pitted one against the other. Two things are being pitted one against the other, and I think, to put it very simply, it's the health and welfare of a major corporation and its profits, and the health and welfare of the public. And I think if we put it that simply, we can understand it, because I heard on the news this morning that PG&E was allowed a rate increase several years ago, about 3 or 4 years ago, in order to retrofit the gas pipes in the area of San Bruno. They're supposed to do it by 2009, and they postponed it to 2000, I believe, 14. And we saw what happened. So that tells me that PG&E doesn't give a damn about the public health, but it sure gives a damn about its own corporate welfare and profits. And I think that's the issue that we have to address. And I think what's happening here in Fairfax is we're standing up to a major corporation for the public good. And I'm really proud of this town. And I hope we win this fight, and I think we're going to win it. Thanks.
Good evening, council members, and good evening, gentlemen. My name is Barbara George. I live in Fairfax, and my organization, Women's Energy Matters, is an intervener at the California Public Utilities Commission. We were not involved in the SmartMeter proceeding, but we are in the general rate case, which is dealing with some of this education program. And some of the issues that are not clear to me yet are your time this evening, for example. Are you charging us ratepayers, or are you charging shareholders? Is it above the line or below the line for you to come here and listen to us? How many consultants has PG&E hired to try to figure out how to force people to take the smart meters, even though we don't want them? To try to destroy this effort that is building around the state. I know that you had many millions of dollars of consultants that you hired to try to kill marine clean energy, and I'd like to know if you're getting up to that level here, and whether you're planning on charging the public, charging the ratepayers for all of those things. I would also like to know, I just heard about a state environmental education program where there was an article about BP being in charge of developing the principles for the program. It turns out that PG&E is also doing that. And I wondered whether you have taken these kinds of issues with the EMF into account in your environmental educational work for the state, which you're planning on rolling out in all of our K through 12 schools. And I'd like to know whether PG&E would like to rethink their involvement in our educational system, because it seems that you have an idea of a one-way education, and I think that there's an education that's going on now for PG&E, if you would only be open to that, which would be nice. I'd like to know what happened to all of the alternatives to the wireless smart grid. Was the potential for fiber optics and other wired meters ever considered? Whatever happened to that? Potential, when did wireless become the standard that we're going to be using this program? Did Mr. Darby's involvement with AT&T in the past have anything to do with that, for example? And what about the grid improvements, the EMF issues on the grid itself, the DC lines and superconductors? Are you looking into those questions? Because those are ways to reduce EMF on the grid itself. And I'd also like to know, in your education program, are you going to be explaining to people people all of the ways that you can balance the load without smart meters. Because my understanding is that that's basically something that happens on the distribution system. It doesn't happen on the level of a household. So there's been a lot of miseducation, I believe, coming out of the PG&E Public Affairs and your 12 PR and lobbying departments that are basically telling people that smart meters are the gateway to this wonderful future, where I think that there are a lot of other paths to that, and it would be really helpful for your experts to discuss what are all the other options that you can do instead of the smart meters. And I would also like to invite people in the audience who are interested in asking these kinds of questions on a daily and weekly basis. That's some of the things that I get to do because I'm an intervener in the Public Utilities Commission proceedings. And WEM does trainings for people to teach people how to become an intervener and work on these types of issues and everything that PG&E does, and we can certainly welcome new folks, and it seems like people here are right for getting involved.
Lynn Corwin, live on Cascade Drive. Albert Einstein made the statement that if honeybees become extinct, human society will follow in 4 years. 90% of the wild bees in the United States have died. And recent studies in the UK and Netherlands have shown that bee diversity is down 80%. The bee species are declining or have become almost extinct in Britain. In the US, beekeepers are experiencing unprecedented die-off and are losing as much as 80% of their colonies. 70% of the wildflowers that depend upon bee pollination are no longer. And the bee collapse is called colony collapse disorder. And it's not known what is causing it. One of the speculations is that it's EMFs. Since we don't know what it is, and since we are dependent upon the bees for our lives, wouldn't it be smart to take the precautionary principle and wait until we know what is causing that bee collapse before we put more EMFs into the atmosphere? Thanks.
Dee Taylor, I live at 214 Presley, here in Fairfax. I just wanted to reply because you had mentioned the rollout in Europe. And since I was living there at the time, and for a year after they did the rollout, for example, in Italy, and it was fiber optic, people were very excited about the smart meters, not realizing what the effect would be on their access to electricity and their billing. It was in great part that Italy, because of the age of the meters, did need some modernization. And so this was seen as a great boon. And it was also accompanied by a massive rollout of solar electricity, in which everyone in Italy could sell their solar electricity back into the grid. It was also accompanied by a privatization of the electrical and natural gas system, and it allowed for competition within the grid, and the smart meters allowed for that competition. So it's not even similar to what we're talking about.